Good evening. I would like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, February 27th, 2018, and the Portland Board of Public Education is meeting at Casco Bay High School in room 200. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Atkinson?
Here.
Ms. Seeliger?
Here.
Ms. Vendel?
Here.
Ms. Davis? Ms. Thompson?
Here.
Ms. Morioni? Mr. Rodriguez?
Presente.
Mr. Balfons?
Here.
Ms. Clater?
Here.
Ms. Farah? Ms. Yuri?
Here.
Ms. Power-Rakowski?
Here.
And Chair Trevorrow.
Here. And Ms. Morioni did let me know that she is traveling, so she was not able to join us this evening. And Ms. Davis has a back injury. She's not able to join us this evening either. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah.
For the report of the chair this evening, I wanted to report on the Buildings for Our Future Advisory Committee co-chairs. I wanted to let the board and the public know that I have made those two appointments. As chair of the board, I was tasked with appointing one city councilor and one school board member from among those that are appointed to that committee to serve as the co-chairs. And I have appointed city councilor Justin Costa as the council co-chair and board member Roberto Rodriguez as the school board member co-chair. I notified them both in writing over the weekend, and I wanted to just state that this represents a huge lift. The work that goes into this is incredibly important for the community and for Portland Public Schools, so it's a great service to the district. And I wanted to thank you both for being willing to serve. And that goes for the committee as a whole. The committee is going to be meeting for years to come. So it's with great thanks to the community for those that are serving on this committee. I also wanted to let the board know that on your agenda tonight, there is a workshop following the meeting on the resolution on gun violence prevention. That was something that I put on the agenda following the recent school shooting in Florida and in response to school shootings that have been ongoing in our country. I know that school communities all over the country have been shaken by what's been happening, and it has led to student activism, and it's led to a lot of emotion in school communities. So I felt it was important to put this on our agenda. As a school board, I think we are perhaps the elected body that is closest in proximity to these tragedies, and yet we're probably the least equipped to address the issues in any sort of systemic way. So this resolution calls on our counterparts in state and federal government to act on gun control issues in the best interest of student and teacher safety. And so I hope that you'll all give input into that tonight so that we can make it a strong board statement, and we'll be taking it up for a vote on March 6th. And that concludes the report of the chair.
Justin joined us.
Oh, yes. City Councilor Justin Costa just joined us. Councilor Costa, you missed my part of my chair's report where I welcomed you as a co-chair to the Buildings for Our Future Advisory Committee and thanked you for what will be a very heavy lift. We're grateful to have your service.
Glad to be back here.
Yeah. Thank you. And report of the students, we do not have one tonight. So moving into report of the superintendent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Today we begin by recognizing Anna Behuniak, a King Middle School 8th grader who recently won a silver award for her poetry submission to the 2017 Ocean Awareness Student Contest, sponsored by BOCEAT Ocean Awareness Programs. Anna's work was selected from among nearly 900 middle school entries from around the world. She received a $750 cash award. The 2017 BOCEAT Ocean Awareness Student Contest challenged students to create visual art, poetry, prose, or film around the theme of ocean pollution, challenges, and solutions. To reflect on the impact of ocean pollution, inspire viewers to consider possible solutions, and challenge them to take action. Anna's poetry submission, titled Perspectives, addressed the specific issues of ocean pollution caused by plastic waste and oil spills. Anna's multi-part poem considered pollution from the unique perspectives of a sea turtle and the ocean itself. Her poem ended with the lines, "I am the only ocean you have, stop forcing me down the drain." We have many outstanding student writers in the Portland Public Schools, but it's not every day that someone wins an award with a worldwide draw. Portland is a city with a deep connection to the ocean, and King is a school that prides itself in teaching young people about environmental stewardship. You, Anna, have brought both of those things together with your talent to bring attention to this important topic. So, Anna, we're incredibly proud of you and your work, and we can't wait to see what you'll do next.
Thank you.
Anna. In light of the tragic event at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida on Valentine's Day, it's increasingly clear to me that as educators, we have to take a proactive role in changing the policy climate in which these events have become all too familiar. Let me begin by saying that in spite of our best efforts, nothing we do in our schools will ever protect us from all possible threats. This is something that I live with, and I, along with my colleagues in our schools, lose sleep over. However, we strive to plan and prepare so that we can minimize the circumstances that lead up to these situations. Enhanced safety measures are a part of this. Drills and practice are a part of this. Staying connected to our students, having strong mental health supports at our schools and in the community, and training for our staff to recognize signs of disconnectedness and know where to go for help are also a part of this. But sane policies that limit access to guns must also be a part of this preparation. As an educator responsible for the safety and security of many students, I'm dismayed that legislators at the state and federal level cannot find a way to decrease the likelihood of catastrophic events such as the one in Parkland, in Newton before that, and in too many other communities through reasonable legislative action. I'm particularly distraught that at this time in particular, the Maine General Assembly is ironically considering a bill that would make our schools less safe by allowing guns to be brought onto school campuses by someone other than a law enforcement officer. And that's LD 1761, if any of you are interested in advocating against that. I'm also dismayed by calls to arm teachers. No teacher, no principal, no superintendent, no matter how well trained, should be asked to take on this responsibility. Make no mistake, teachers and school staff will put themselves in harm's way for their children, as we witnessed in Newton and in Parkland. But they should not be asked to decide whether to leave the children in their immediate care to become schools' first responders. It's time for serious proposals, not red herrings. I'm encouraged that at this time, students are leading the way. Many of our students have expressed an intent to participate in the national walkout on March 14th. As an educator, I am personally supportive of any effort by students to engage in civic life. We're currently evaluating our response as a district to the proposed walkout so that it's consistent with our values and responsible to all students and staff. We look forward to working with our students and staff to encourage them to find an appropriate way to express their viewpoints on this issue in a constructive and non-coercive way, regardless of where they stand on the issue of gun control. Assistant Superintendent Crocker is leading this effort, and we expect to have a clear and consistent message going to our community in the very near term. I'm also encouraged by the response from educators. Maine Educators United Against Gun Violence has organized a rally on the steps of City Hall for March 8th. Many of our teachers and school staff will be a part of this and subsequent actions by the coalition, and I look forward to being there myself. As a voter, I support and advocate for laws that limit access to weapons, including bans of certain types of weapons, strong background checks, and the elimination of loopholes for obtaining them. I encourage my colleagues to express their guaranteed right to free speech on this issue. We need a thoughtful and proactive discussion if we're going to see needed change. In a not completely unrelated matter, I would like to remind board members and the public that we will have our third Parent University event this coming Wednesday at Portland High School, featuring the documentary Angst. It will be followed by a panel presentation featuring PPS staff working on adolescent mental health, who will be talking about their work and answering questions from the public. I would encourage anyone interested in understanding the challenges facing today's youth to attend this important session. Also, I'll be starting my Parent University Lunchtime Book Club on March 9th at the Portland Public Library. The club will feature the book iGen by author Jean Twenge, which looks at today's generation of post-millennial teens, which she dubs iGen, from a historical and generational perspective. As the parent of an iGen teen, I found the book enlightening and at times troubling, and I encourage anyone grappling with raising a teen today or in the near future to join us to share insights, experiences, and questions. Next week, I will be presenting my budget proposal to the board. Again, this year, we face a challenging budget scenario. Our costs continue to rise while our state revenue is significantly reduced. Contrary to some of the early reports in the Press Herald, our state allocation shows that we have a $3.2 million reduction over last year's final budget. We will be facing key decisions as a staff, as a board, and as a community in the coming months as we determine what is the appropriate level of support for our school system. I'm grateful to the board's Finance Committee for the work that it has done to date to help shape my proposal and illuminate the key decision points needed to fully understand our options. I would like to remind the public that we held a community budget forum on February 10th right here at Casco Bay. The forum was simulcast live on social media and is available for viewing on our webpage. I would urge all of our stakeholders to view that presentation as it provides necessary context for the upcoming budget conversations. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Report of the Secretary. Consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of February 6, 2018. Is there a motion? Ms. Seeliger, seconded by Ms. Bendel. Are there any questions on the meeting minutes?
Just one.
Yes, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Under the superintendent's remarks, I think if we can check the spelling for Ms. Kate Burke, the young student who's working
I
at,
had that too.
so I've seen it spelled B-U-R-K-E and Q-U-E. I think this young person is probably going to be someone we want to keep an eye on. Getting her name right will be important.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on the meeting minutes? Seeing none, any further discussion on the meeting minutes? So with that correction, all those in favor of approving the meeting minutes of February 6, 2018, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. And I'm sorry.
Here, so
Oh,
didn't vote.
Mr. Atkinson abstains. Moving into report of the committees. curriculum, Ms. Morioni is not here. Is anybody prepared to report on her behalf? Seeing none, we'll table that until next time. Operations, Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. Give me a second. I'm pulling up mine because I prepared. All right. So the Operations Committee met last month, Tuesday, January 23rd, over at district offices for our first meeting of the 2018 year. During that meeting, we reviewed the work of the committee on the 2017 year, and we also received an update on the CIP request that we submitted to the city. We understand, and I should have checked in on this, that city manager is going to be presenting his full CIP to the council pretty soon. And I guess I don't have the information of when that's happening.
He did that at the last, I've read this in the paper.
So I'll get back to you. So pretty much we received the update on that CIP that we approved last year. And in looking forward to the year ahead, we've asked the directors of different departments to provide a level sets presentation so that, as an informational item, so that the Operations Committee can have an update of what's going on. So our Food Services Department and Transportation Departments will be presenting. And we've asked the board members to provide questions ahead of time to include into those presentations so that we can have them ready in time. And then lastly, in order to accommodate for the really busy budget season ahead, the committee has decided to postpone meeting during February and March. And we're going to try to stay available in case the need arises that we need to convene urgently. We understand that we need to remain flexible for that need. My apologies for not having dates ready for the rest of the year, but I think that we have some preliminary dates from April through the rest of the year, and we'll put those out pretty soon. And that is the rest of that's the end of my update. Thank you.
Thank you. Finance, Ms. Mendel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So budget season has begun, and next Tuesday, March 6th, the superintendent will present his budget for the next fiscal year. The Finance Committee will meet next on Thursday, March 8th at 6 p.m. at Central Office to begin the review process.
Thank you. Policy, Legislative, and Public Affairs, Ms. Seeliger.
Thank you. We're going to be having our next Policy and Public Affairs Committee meeting on Tuesday, March 27th at 5:30 at the Portland District offices.
Are there any other committee and/or member concerns? Seeing none, we'll move into
Hi.
Mr. Atkins.
Yes, I just wanted to commend and recognize 3 Casco Bay High School students, Martha Thompson, Sophie Stekowski, and our own Tiana Yuri for their recent article in The Forecaster defending the school's gender-neutral bathrooms, which you may have seen out in the hallway. So I just wanted to thank you, Representative Yuri, and to your colleagues for having the courage and taking the time to stand up for your school and the open, inclusive community we're working hard to make a reality at Portland Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving into consent items, would the superintendent read the items into consent?
Yes, Madam Chair. Paths received soil plugs for their landscape and gardens aquaponds from GrowTech of South Portland. East End Community School received winter weather gear from St. Luke's Cathedral of Portland. The Food Services Department received a cash donation to cover a student's negative lunch balance from an anonymous donor. Hall Elementary School received a cash donation to be used towards a playground fund from Jeannie Damari of Naples, Maine. And Ocean Avenue Elementary School received the following donations: Dick's Sporting Goods gift cards to purchase student athletic equipment from the American Heart Association of Scarborough, books from Jonathan Clegg of Portland, books for the Sharing Bookshelf from Kathleen Stevens of Saco, new boots, gloves, and mittens for students from Jody Halliday and Bill Kowalczyk of Peaks Island, and 15 gift cards for teacher shout-outs from Otto's Pizza of Portland. So thank you very much to all of our generous contributors.
Thank you. Moving into old business, guess at this time, I would entertain if Ms. Thompson has an unagended motion she wanted to make.
Well, what we're going to do is do a proposed motion, so if you want to, you want me to read it?
If you could state it, I don't have the language in front of me.
Certainly. So Ms. Davis couldn't be with us this evening because of her back, and so she and I have been working on this, and she prepared this for the board in anticipation that she was going to be here this evening, and we worked together because I'm in agreement with it. So the proposed motion is a motion to postpone consideration and action to approve the 2018-2019 school calendar to the March 6, 2018 meeting of the Board of Education to allow for the Board of Education to consider and act to adopt the holiday named consistent with City Council Resolve 3-1718 and give reasonable notice to the public of the board's intent to act. The rationale that she cites is Bruce Smith has stated we have the authority to name holidays, that Superintendent Botana was quoted in the Portland Press Herald on September 18th, 2017 regarding changing the name in the school calendar would require a vote of the school board. And nothing was noted in the background summary for this item that by voting to approve the calendar, the board was also voting to change the name of the holiday. This oversight resulted in board members and the public being unaware that adopting the calendar would also change the name of a holiday. And so that's the proposed motion, and if there's a second.
So I'll take that as a motion by Ms. Thompson. Is there a second? Mr. Rodriguez. So would you like to speak further to your motion, or is that?
I think I actually read the whole thing, but more so the holiday change within the calendar. So we had in our background information, the information about student days, staff days, early release information, and non-teacher, non-student days. But there is also a change in the holiday of Columbus Day, changed to Indigenous Peoples Day, and the board has not discussed that. And we wanted the opportunity to discuss it. So by putting this motion forward and postponing to the March 6th meeting, we still have time. We don't have to get a calendar to the state till April. And on March 6th, we would have a motion to then approve the calendar, recognizing that second holiday as the superintendent has brought forward. Reason being is the council, when they did their action, we're following suit, from their resolve, but also they allowed for public comment. And I think that the public is not aware that we're changing this holiday, and allow them the opportunity, should they be for or against the name change, to have that opportunity to speak to the board. And by voting on the calendar this evening, that doesn't provide that opportunity or public notice.
Are there any questions on the motion? Mr. Rodriguez.
I guess just a question. I guess my understanding of including the holiday change, or the name of the holiday change in the calendar, isn't so much that we're changing the name of the holiday as much as we're, following what the council had already done for the city. So I'm not entirely sure that we are changing anything per se, other than just calling the holiday what the city has already decided to call it.
I think that's only partially true. I do think that we are, I'm prepared when the main motion about the calendar comes forward to talk about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And yes, we are following the council's lead. They took up this issue back in the fall, and at the time, Chair Terraro asked staff to consider the possibility of us doing that as well, which we considered and advanced through this. I do want to sort of take issue with the suggestion that this was not properly noticed. I, spoke to the fact that this was happening during my introduction of the item at the board meeting on February 6th. We had a workshop after the after the meeting to talk about a number of issues, including the calendar. And as you know, that workshop was short because we had gone for a long time on other issues, and at that point, we decided to sort of cut that item short, so we didn't have a full discussion about it, but it was the intent of that item for the board to have a discussion about the change of Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day.
As I recall from the workshop, we had waived the reading of the calendar. If you can correct me, but that was my understanding. We as a board decided to waive the reading and bring it up now, at this point.
I did comment to the board that this was on for a vote at this meeting, and that we wouldn't have an opportunity to workshop it, considering that we were going home at that late hour. And we didn't officially take any vote on waiving it. However, it seemed to me that the majority of the board did not take particular issue with not having a workshop. Are there any other questions on the motion? Seeing none, I would take public comment at this time on the motion, and I would just say this is a motion to table the item and separate it out as its own item from the calendar.
Postpone, not table. Yep.
To postpone to the March 6th meeting. And if you have comment on the tabling, you may approach the podium, state your name and address. You'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, I'm Fiona Hopper. I live at 102 Lincoln Street, and I am a Portland resident and Portland Schools teacher. I teach ELL at Reiki School, and I also co-teach the district course on race in the United States for Portland teachers. I am here with also several members of the Indigenous community of Maine to speak in support of the change from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day. People have traveled to get here. This was arranged in advance for us to be able to speak. So moving that out another week would make it very difficult for others to be able to return and speak on behalf of this change. So I would strongly hope that the board would allow whatever comment is available tonight and move on, seeing as the city has already decided that this is the right thing to do for our state, and our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment and call for board discussion. Ms. Thompson.
I just want to be clear that by Ms. Davis and I doing this, it was not that we were not in favor or one way or the other of this action. It was more so for public notice. So I just want to make that crystal clear that neither Ms. Davis nor myself are necessarily against changing the holiday. It was more about public notice. There is a strong contingency of Italian Americans here in Portland, and they feel very strongly as well. And I just wanted to provide an opportunity, should they want to come out and speak, as they did to the council, that they have that opportunity. So that was to provide them an opportunity, as well as those that may disagree with the decision. But it wasn't necessarily because we disagreed with the changing of the holiday, just more about process. Thank you.
Other board discussion. Mr. Rodriguez.
I don't like to put people on the spot, right? So I was wondering how our students feel about their calendar. I'm looking at you, Isabel.
I'm fully in support of Indigenous Peoples Day, and I, having taken history now for 3 years at Portland High School, I think it's really, really important that we celebrate the history of people that we may have, it's hard to word this eloquently. I think settlers have taken advantage of Indigenous people for hundreds of years in the United States, and it is the least we can do to rename this holiday. I think for the people in Maine and for the people across the country, Indigenous Peoples Day represents our history better than Columbus Day does, especially because Columbus never actually came to America. And the Indigenous people of America live in America. So.
Thank you. Anything else from the students?
I guess I would just say, not necessarily, I completely agree with you, Isabel. However, I guess on the subject of postponing the approval of the calendar, to me, I feel like if the city council's already had the discussion, I feel like it makes sense to approve it today, just because we have people who've already come out, and because in our process, we've already been delayed a few times. So I feel like it might make us more agile and more prepared for the future if we approve it today, since people have already had an opportunity to comment during the city council. However, I do fully appreciate and respect the idea that people should be able to comment and should be able to come out and voice their opinions, but I feel that that was expressed when it was passed by the city council.
Anything you want? You just speak into it.
Perfect. I have nothing new to say. They covered a lot of it, but I agree with what both of them have to say.
Thank you. Any other board discussion? I would just say I agree with the superintendent's assessment of this. I think, back in October, I think I said in a chair's report that I was going to ask staff to come back with this issue in time for our calendar this year. And the superintendent has spoken about it in his reports. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It's been on our agenda for 3 weeks now. We had the first read on it. It's had the same process that every motion has. And we have also received, although our legal counsel did say that it does take board action, we have the authority to change our holiday names. Our legal counsel also said that through the school calendar is a perfectly appropriate way to take that action. So by virtue of approving our school calendar, we will be making the change to Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm comfortable taking this up tonight. I think we should go ahead and do it because we've got a lot of pressing matters on our agendas upcoming. It doesn't make sense to keep this one on. Any other comments from the board? Seeing none, I would call for a vote, and I'd ask you just to read your motion again.
Was a motion to postpone consideration action to approve the 2018-19 school calendar to the March 6, 2018 meeting of the Board of Public Education to allow for the Board of Education to consider an act to adopt the holiday name consistent with City Council resolve and give reasonable notice to the public of the board's intent to act.
All those in favor? We have one, Ms. Thompson. All those opposed? And the opposing members are Balfonts, Rodriguez, Atkinson, Seeliger, Vendel, the students, and Trevorrow. And with that, we'll move into consideration and action to approve the 2018-2019 school calendar. Is there a motion? Mr. Rodriguez, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. And would the superintendent like to speak to the motion?
Yes. Tonight, we're asking you to approve our 2018-2019 school calendar. The calendar is similar to this year's calendar and complies with our state requirement for coordination with other districts who send students to paths. As you've heard today, one thing that is different in our calendar is that we are proposing to honor and thank the 4 Maine Indian tribes, the Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy, known collectively as the Wabanaki or people of the Dawnland, who are our community partners and traditional inhabitants of the land in our state. We do this by proposing to make the second Tuesday in October into Indigenous Peoples Day. With this, we join the city of Portland and several other municipalities in Maine in honoring the first inhabitants of this land on this day that has traditionally honored those who came after them. This action is consistent with one of our equity goal strategies, which is to review current policies and practices that create unintended barriers to access and dismantle them as part of our effort to create a more just school system.
Thank you. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, I will call for public comment on the motion, and this would be the opportunity to comment on the merits of Indigenous Peoples Day if you so choose. State your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Miku Paul, and I live at 1603 Westbrook Street in Stroudwater. I've been asked to come this evening to speak in support of the City of Portland's resolution and for the schools to designate the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples' Day. Portland joins Bangor, Belfast, Orono, and Brunswick in the decision to reflect a clear historical reality that Christopher Columbus was something more than an explorer. When he arrived in the Bahamas, he was taken with the beauty, strength, and friendliness of the Taino Indigenous Islanders. He wrote, "With 50 men, they could all be subjected and made to do all that one wished." He envisioned a future market for New World gold, spices, cotton, and, quote, "as many slaves as their majesties order to make from among those who are idolaters," meaning non-Christian, "whose sales might underwrite subsequent expeditions. Tainos who resisted the Spanish were set upon by dogs, disemboweled by swords, burned at stakes, trampled by horses, atrocities, quote, to which no chronicle could ever do justice," wrote Friar Bartolome de las Casas, a crusader for Indian rights in 1542. Against the Caribs, the Spanish had a tougher time fighting pitched battles, capturing hundreds of slaves. Columbus sailed home from his second voyage with over 1,000 captives, bound for the slave auctions at Cadiz. Many died en route, their bodies tossed overboard. Thus began a colonization and enslavement that was to help create a domino effect in the Americas as Spain and other nations sought to mine the gold and later silver, as well as extract the fabulous resources they found on the continent. Now, more than 500 years later, most Indigenous people are living with the legacy of a brutal colonization that included both an Indigenous and African slave trade, theft of all land through settlement and war, and a systematic attempt to erase Indigenous cultures altogether in North America through the reservation system and the forced relocation of Indigenous children to residential schools. I'm 59 years old. I grew up in Old Town. The only Indigenous history I was taught while going through public school was the myth of discovery of the new land by Columbus and, of course, the Western expansion and the Plains Wars. My own tribe and history was never even mentioned. This has a peculiar effect on a child as well as a community. Donna Loring, Penobscot, well known, authored and sponsored LD 291, an act to require teaching Maine Native American history and culture in Maine's schools. That was June 2001. And that law is changing the way Maine views its own history. It's common knowledge that history is typically written by the victors, and the U.S. is no different. Since the civil rights movement, many marginalized groups in America have worked hard to recover their own history and reclaim their cultural birthrights. This is true not only for Indigenous peoples. It can lead to change in a community and also in the historical narrative. It's not a taking away or lessening of another's narrative, but an expansion that will enrich the larger story of who we all are as a human community. Change can be unsettling. It shouldn't be feared in and of itself. When we acknowledge the brutal history that shaped this continent, we're giving others a courageous example of commitment to truth and a way forward in an increasingly complex and divided world. I commend the City of Portland's decision to establish Indigenous Peoples' Day. As an Indigenous Maine woman, as a community member, and as a guest teacher in Portland's public schools. I've worked for decades in Portland to help teachers and school children become more aware of the Indigenous people of Maine, their history and culture. I was really thrilled when 291 passed, even though it's an unfunded mandate. The initial energy and passion that moved the educational work forward has waned, unfortunately. While I do encounter students who know there are Indians in Maine. Only some of them can even name all 4 of the tribes. There's still a disconnect in the curriculum material, with more focus on Wabanaki as romantic figures of the past or basket makers. And when I presented at Longfellow some years ago, I did a week-long in residence, I asked the children in the beginning, I said, I've got to get to know these children. We have to have a rapport before I begin to work with them. And I asked the children what they knew about Indian people, and they said they don't wear any clothes. I was told by the teachers 2 years ago at Portland Museum of Art during a PD day for side-by-side, I said, well, how many of you here have done any Wabanaki studies in the last 3 years? Not one had done so. While progress is being made, it's slow, and I would suggest more can be done to support teachers that are striving to include Wabanaki history and to also include the culture in their curriculum. And lastly, I just want to say I'm a writer. My most recent publication was in a teaching text called Transforming Our Practices, and it's about Indigenous pedagogies and teaching in art, because literally the Indigenous approach to education is different, and I use that paradigm when I work with the children, and I have great results with it. We use something called CBE, culture-based education. And it's very different from the Western model. And I think that we can make better use in the 21st century of tech if we're having trouble reaching out to the communities and bringing in people to assist and work with teachers and expose the students more to Wabanaki history and culture. We have tech too. Our tech is TEK, traditional ecological knowledge. I think we have a lot to learn from each other, and being respectful and inclusive is a really good way to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, yes, I have to remind people that we actually don't allow clapping. We don't allow booing either, so just to make it a neutral space for everybody.
I'll try to be brief. Cindy Rotolo, 46 Candlewick Road, Portland citizen, Portland educator for 28 years maybe in Portland, a few more years elsewhere. My comments will be brief. First, I'd like to just say that I honor the premise of the proposal that did come forward, and we heard clearly that School Board Member Thompson, and presenting on behalf of School Board Member Davis, was just bringing forward not a position against calling it Indigenous Peoples Day, but rather looking at process. And as a longtime Portlander, I understand that a little bit, even though I honor that there has been other opportunity before this date for people to write. At the same time, I honor it because there's a long history of, if we don't take some of those steps in Portland, self-included, folks, rightly so, will access their ability and right to come back and push back for that. One point, if I have the correct understanding, though, is also that, as we heard, and for as long as I've been an educator in Portland, calendar is set by the school board. So there's that piece. Where I stand on the piece of the change of the name, both for the city, Portland, which had 4 names before that, Casco, Ashigon, Casco, Falmouth, and Portland. So you can see where I'm going to go with that. I am certainly in the position of renaming, and appreciated renaming it Indigenous Peoples Day. It will surprise some. I may need to visit somewhere else to sleep tonight because I'm also an Italian American, and my own spouse is certainly, we've had a lot of debate around that, but I have to say I honor it and I appreciate the vote tonight going that way. At the risk of self-promotion, which is not my intent, when we opened up East End School a number of years ago, and I was on staff with the group opening it up, we were an expeditionary learning school. I had the joy and the challenge of working with teammates and co-authoring 2 learning expeditions that I thought were of great value at 3rd and 4th grade. One was named They Came Before Us, and we did an in-depth study for our students in fourth grade and brought them forward in understanding those that come before us and those that were here as the Indigenous people, and the gifts and how the past impacts the future and present. And the other was called Promise and Preservation, as a third grade teacher, looking at the history of Portland. So I honor all of this premise in that regard, while still respecting that that's one of the things that's great about America, great about Maine and Portland, is we have opposing viewpoints. But I have to say, I'm in the camp of we're making the appropriate decision in renaming it in the calendar.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi again. Should I say my address again? 102 Lincoln Street. And I speak tonight as a teacher, a co-teacher, as I said, of the Race in the United States class, the School for Portland Teachers, and also as an ally of the Wabanaki community. And I will warn you, these run about 5 minutes, my remarks, so I apologize for going over. You can stop me if you want to. The African-American scholar and writer Beverly Daniel Tatum compares systemic racism to a moving walkway in an airport. Those walking with the walkway, she states, are doing active harm, and those standing still are passive bystanders. Some of the bystanders, she writes, may feel the motion of the conveyor belt, but unless they are walking actively in the opposite direction, at a speed faster than the conveyor belt, unless they are actively anti-racist, they will find themselves carried along with the others. She explains that interrupting the cycle of racism is in large part the responsibility of white people, because white privilege means that whites have greater access to the social institutions in need of transformation. To whom much is given, she asserts, much is required. Tonight's adoption of the change from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day in our school calendar has made me confident that the leaders of our institution are willing to walk actively in the opposite direction on the conveyor belt. In adopting Indigenous Peoples Day, we as a district are acknowledging that the land we stand on has been continuously inhabited by Indigenous people for over 12,000 years. Indigenous Peoples Day disrupts the common belief in our state that Native people no longer exist. This change pushes back against the legacy of colonization that has made Indigenous people invisible in our country and in our state. Superintendent Botana and our district leaders have shown their commitment to equity and cultural responsiveness. They have offered unequivocal support of all of our students and families, and have supported teachers working to move classrooms, schools, and curricula forward on issues of race and racism. Their willingness to listen attentively and act courageously has begun to shift the culture of our district, allowing teachers and students a voice in reshaping the classroom. Yet in order to push back against 500 years of colonization, an even greater effort will be required. And so I would like to take a moment to explain why our district's support of the 2001 law requiring teachers to teach Wabanaki studies, LD 291, is vital to ensuring that this calendar change signal a meaningful commitment to the Indigenous people of our state. Tribal leaders and Wabanaki allies worked tirelessly for the passage of LD 291 nearly 20 years ago. Yet the majority of teachers across the state remain ignorant of its existence. Until 5 years ago, I was among them. Thus, the legacy of colonization lives on in continued invisibility of Wabanaki people in our school programming, teacher education programming, and curriculum. I don't think it's too much to say that we are, at present, having a national reckoning about race. And while we may not have Confederate monuments, our reckoning is no less real and no less urgent. We must look no further than the Skowhegan Chamber of Commerce's Hunt for the Indian 2017 holiday shopping promotion for confirmation of this. As the largest and most diverse, most progressive school district in the state, we are in a position to lead the reckoning, to rise to the challenge implied by Beverly Daniel Tatum when she writes, "To whom much is given, much is required." I thought in closing I would share a personal example of how Wabanaki studies transformed my linguistically and culturally diverse classroom here in Portland. I teach newly arrived immigrant and refugee students in grades 3 through 5 at Reiki School. Many of my students arrive with little prior education and are coping with horrific trauma. The countries they are fleeing have been torn apart by the aftermath of European and American colonization and occupation. Many speak both Indigenous and colonial languages and are connected to Indigenous cultures. 2 years ago, a group of students from the Quiche region of Guatemala arrived at Reiki School in late January. They entered my intensive English language development class just before we were about to begin our Wabanaki Studies unit in conjunction with the 4th grade Maine study. I rolled out a timeline the length of my classroom to illustrate how long the Wabanaki have lived on this land in comparison to people who look like me. I then took out colonial figures, paper ships, and a world map I had prepared. As I began to explain in the simple terms required for beginner ELLs what transpired when Europeans arrived, I saw the faces of my new students change. They had been silent for days and suddenly began to tell me in Spanish the story of their people. They saw themselves in the Wabanaki, and from then on, they led the way, working with their Angolan, Burundian, Somalian, and Middle Eastern classmates to explore Wabanaki history and culture. So that by the time a student named Azelis came to our class as a member of the Passamaquoddy tribe, my entire class was all ears. They wrote, talked about, and contemplated like I had never seen before. Contained within the exploitation, struggle, and enduring resistance of the Wabanaki is the larger story of race and power, one resonant with people the world over. And the change to Indigenous Peoples Day holds a space for this story of Indigenous resilience. Tonight's calendar change is a move forward towards anti-racism. It pushes back against centuries of institutionalized racism, and it challenges us to have our schools, teachers, and curricula do the same. So as we usher in a new era of cultural responsiveness in our district, let it begin with a commitment to educating ourselves and our children about the land we all call home. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm actually not from Portland. My name is Mullian Dana. I traveled here from Indian Island, the Penobscot Nation, and I'm the ambassador for the tribe. So I wrote up a little statement in support of renaming Indigenous Peoples Day in the calendar, or renaming Columbus Day, I should say. On behalf of the Penobscot Nation and the Indigenous Nations of Maine, I want to extend my sincere and warmest gratitude that this measure has been brought to this vote tonight. The Portland City Council took the significant and courageous step to recognize Indigenous Peoples Day in this beautiful city as a way to truly honor and respect the first peoples of this land, rather than celebrating our generational trauma caused by the attempted extermination of our race. Christopher Columbus and his views on Indigenous people as being subhuman contributed greatly to our near extinction. Columbus even went on trial for war crimes for his inhumane and immoral torture tactics he employed on Indigenous men, women, and children. Furthermore, this step corrects an important piece of history that we've already heard tonight, and that is the notion that Columbus discovered the America that we live in today. He actually never stepped foot here. A more appropriate way to respect the origins of our great country is to make the change to Indigenous Peoples Day, which a wave of towns and cities are doing, so that they can be on the right side of history. I have a long past of activism, and I have found that the only way to make positive social change and improve relations between races and groups is through education and communication. Each generation is a new chance to remove more and more of the prejudice and ignorance that engenders racism, misunderstandings, hate, and the perpetuation of internalized oppression of the marginalized groups. The step you are taking tonight is giving the children of your schools a gift. The gift of truth, the gift of knowledge, the gift of seeing their Indigenous friends and neighbors as their equals and not as a savage, weak, or conquered people of the past. We are very much still here, and we are truly honored by each time one of these important changes are made. I would echo my support for following the LD 291 law. That was really groundbreaking legislation, and I'm very, very proud that Donna Loring is my great aunt, and she really inspired me to get into this type of work. I thank you so much for your time tonight, and my ancestors and descendants, I'll thank you as well.
Thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, I would close public comment and ask for any board discussion. Ms. Thompson.
Thank you. I will be supporting the motion this evening for the calendar because it's clear that the board didn't want to postpone, so that's fine. This is outside of process, but I do want to recognize as well a letter that I received from the Italian Heritage Center because there is someone not here from the Italian Heritage Center to read this, I said I would read it. And again, it's in, as Ms. Rotolo said, in the spirit of that there are opposing views, and we can be all live in Portland together and realize that there are opposing views to various things. And I won't read the entire letter, but just to start with the fact that they do close that they want to make perfectly clear the fact that they fully sponsor Indigenous Peoples Day in Portland, but they also want to share what their concerns were of changing it related to Columbus Day. And I'll just read a small snippet. And it says, "We as Italian Americans are very proud of our heritage. Portland in particular has a very large population of Italians. Because of our forefathers, the people from the old country who labored on the Portland waterfront, who were construction workers and masons, literally some of who had laid the cobblestones on the streets of our beautiful Old Port section of Portland, including some of my own, not mine, my own relatives, did whatever they could to find work to put food on the table for their families. They worked for everything, and nothing was handed to them. Once our grandparents came to America and settled in Portland, they always spoke English and demanded that their children speak the English language. Italian was their second language. They did not try to change American culture. They wanted to be a part of it. They also went on to say that they certainly recognize the Native Americans endured many atrocities in the past, and that these actions should be rectified, but felt strongly that not at the expense of celebrating what they feel is their Italian ancestors, who they also noted that faced discrimination for centuries. So I won't read anything more than that, just to recognize their position as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board discussion? Mr. Atkinson.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little brief anecdote. I went to the Maine State Museum this past week with my family, and they have an exhibit about the last 12,000 years of human existence in this area that we now call the state of Maine. And this 12,000 years, it's essentially an arrowhead collection. There's an oyster midden, there are a couple of canoes, but it's archaeological. And on the website, it's even found under the label prehistory. So, that's the 11,500 years before the Europeans came. There's just nothing, and there's nothing about the continuing existence of native of indigenous people here in our state. But then, you get to the Popham colony in 1607, which lasted for 1 year. And there's a whole big room about it with all the artifacts and everything that they have from that 1 year. And the only other notice that I found, and I was there with a 2-year-old, so this may not have been comprehensive, but the only other thing that I saw in the museum about the indigenous people of Maine was this: beginning with King Philip's War in 1675, Maine's English, French, and Native Americans engaged in a long military struggle for control over the region. Disease, supply shortages, and the ravages of warfare finally eliminated Indians from the contest. So I think this is the problem that we're attempting to rectify, this whitewashing of history, and the stories of the indigenous people of this state and this country and our continents should not have been erased, but they have been. So I'm excited to vote for the calendar and especially for the Indigenous Peoples Day piece.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add just a little personal point of view. Growing up in Puerto Rico, we learn a lot about our Taino heritage. I know it was a pretty significant part of my public education, and there's a strong sense of pride that comes from that. And mind you that Tainos were one of the first tribes that were literally eliminated after Europeans arrived. And, we learned language, so I remember in school learning words for family and the city and mom and dad, and we learned the indigenous word for the island was Borinquen, right? And so Puerto Ricans, I don't know if you've ever met Puerto Ricans, we say, Boricua, yo soy Boricua, and that all comes from the indigenous. So it's such an ingrained part of our history, and we appreciate it. And we use Taino, how do you call it? Like artistry, and it's just such a strong part of who we are. And we're so proud of it. It just makes sense to embrace it. So I've always appreciated the role that it played in my life and what it means to my culture. So I just love that we're heading in this direction, and that we have that spirit, and that it does fit what this district's trying to accomplish. Yeah, that's it.
Deanna.
I'll just quickly note. So I just want to really appreciate everyone who's come out today to speak about this issue and to voice their support. I want to say I'm so appreciative that this district is making this move towards more equity in our school system. I never think that any sort of systematic or institutionalized racism is appropriate in a school system. I'll just voice something that happened to me in middle school. I was speaking to a friend, and I was like, Christopher Columbus, it was Columbus Day, and I was like, Christopher Columbus really did commit countless atrocities against the indigenous people, including things like rape, including things like slavery and torture, and it was awful. She was like, Christopher Columbus? Who? I thought he discovered America, and I thought that he was this really great figure, and that's what my dad told me. And I feel like there's really a disconnect in our school system, especially from what I've been hearing from people in the crowd, from where students don't understand. There isn't this common understanding that we share this heritage and we share this legacy of people who have suffered atrocities. And we all share in that. We all hold that. And I think it's really important that we make this move to change the name of this holiday so that we can begin to start spreading that knowledge. And I think that it's especially important for students who have Native American heritage, but it's also important for any student who is in the school system, and especially students who are minorities, to feel like they're safe and taking away this barrier of feeling like they aren't included in our history and are included. And I think this is a really great way to celebrate our heritage in Maine, and I just want to commend everyone for it. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Mendel.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all to those who've come to speak and show your support for this. I am not from Maine, and so I have not had the benefit of, learning, about the indigenous tribes of Maine and the history. But as a member of the Maine Community Foundation's People of Color Fund, I've been a participant on that fund for since 2010. I've had the benefit of reviewing grant applications of different ethnic community-based organizations that are doing great work all over the state to improve equity and justice in communities of color. And in particular, the most powerful thing that I had learned from, the work that's been happening in the Native communities is, all of the atrocities, the attempts at truth and reconciliation, and the great work that's been happening and awareness at the policy level. I think that this is one small step we could do as policymakers to continue to educate the public and to force these different narratives into the mainstream. And so the more that we can continue this dialogue, and that we can also not just ensure that this is happening this learning is happening with our students in our schools, but they're happening in our community and having that discussion. I think the stronger we are as a community at making sure that we acknowledge and address the injustices that different communities, different people have encountered in the past. So thank you for coming, and I'm proud to support this.
Any other comments? Well, I would just say I agree with, I think, everything that has been said on this issue tonight, and I am looking forward to supporting this. As an analogy, you know, I was an English major in college, and when you study English, the texts that you're primarily taught are the vast majority of them written by white men. And when you present to a student that these are the great books that have been written throughout history, and all of those books are written by white men, you are perpetuating the implicit bias that greatness is reserved for one particular type of person. And I think of Indigenous Peoples Day in the same, or Christopher Columbus Day, I should say, in the same vein. It's a Eurocentric version of history, and it leaves out a lot of negative truths that really speak to a dark part in colonialization in this country. And so the move to Indigenous Peoples Day does two things. First, it recognizes the people that actually did discover this land and allows us to celebrate people who are traditionally have been traumatized throughout history and continue to be today. And the other thing it does is it challenges us to think critically about history. What is history? And what implicit biases might we be perpetuating when we couch them in a certain way? And I think that's important to our students. You know, we strive for our students not just to learn the content areas that make them college and career ready, but also to be meaningful participants in society. And I think that teaching that critical eye is imperative to creating adults that will go out and impact the community. So I'll be supporting this tonight. Are there any other comments from the board before we take a vote? Seeing none. All those in favor of approving the 2018-2019 school calendar, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Consideration and action to approve the PAE 2017-2018 calendar. Is there a motion? Mr. Balfont, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. Would the superintendent like to speak to this motion?
I would like Anita St. Ange, the director of the Portland Adult Education, to speak to this.
Good evening. I would just say this is actually the 2018-19 calendar.
Correction. Thank you.
That's okay. For those of you who aren't familiar with our calendar, this is no different than what has been done in the past, but we are a little different than the regular school calendar. We like to recognize our students as parents, and so we give an opportunity for our students who are parents to allow their students to get into school and get settled before we start our school year. So we run on 3 trimesters. The first starting the week after the Portland Public Schools begin. Each of our trimesters is either 10 or 12 weeks. That allows people to have the 45 hours that they need for education to get credit for their high school diplomas. We have over 2,000 students who are studying academics. We have classes that begin at 8:30 in the morning and end at 8:30 at night. Monday through Thursday, and then 8:30 to noon on Fridays. And we do have some job skills classes that run through the end of July. But our academic year ends June, next year will be scheduled to end June 27th. And that's it.
Okay. Are there any questions on the PAE calendar? Seeing none, we would take public comment on the 2018-2019 PAE calendar. Seeing none, is there any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the PAE 2018-2019 calendar, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. consideration and action to revise policy ACAA, harassment and sexual harassment of students. Is there a motion? Mr. Atkinson, seconded by Ms. Vendel. Would the superintendent like to speak to the motion?
Assistant Superintendent Crocker is going to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Superintendent Botana. I'd like to thank the members of the Policy Committee of the Portland Board of Education for their work here, specifically Tim Atkinson, who has helped us to achieve greater equity and inclusiveness in our policies, and you will see that in ACAA. Thank you for that, Tim. Though we're not bringing forward the R component because that does not come before the board for a vote, there was a slight change made in that to align with policy advice from our colleagues at Drummond Woodsum. And so I would thank you all for your support of the revision of policy ACAA going forward.
Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, is there any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? Mr. Atkinson?
Yeah, I'll just mention so we're adding gender identity and expression to the list of protected classes under this policy, and the way that the Maine Human Rights Commission, Maine Human Rights Act is written, gender expression and identity are sort of lumped in and included in with sexual orientation. So this just pulls them out and makes that explicit that that gender identity and gender expression are protected and would be considered in harassment and sexual harassment.
Great, thank you. Any other board discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of revising policy ACAA, harassment and sexual harassment of students, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Okay, we are on to new business. So we have a first read to adopt a resolution on gun violence prevention. It's a first read, so there is no comment, but that is the workshop that we'll be having later this evening. And we have consideration and action to appoint 6 community members to the buildings for our future advisory building committee as recommended by the board's appointment committee. And is it Ms. Thompson? Or we need the motion first. Is there a motion? Ms. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. Ms. Thompson, are you speaking to this motion?
I was going to start and then turn it over to
Okay.
you, just if you want me to
I was going
give
to
some
provide
of
the context and then.
I was going to give the history
that's
of
what I
where
was
we
gonna
are.
do,
All right,
but
then
you
go
go
for it. No, go for it.
I'll give you a break from talking. To the superintendent's point, I just want to provide a background context with regards to the building committee community member appointments. At the December 19th Board of Education meeting, the board approved a plan to include 6 members of the public as representatives on the buildings for our future advisory building committee as follows. As a result of the actions taken by the board, the following revised motion was adopted. This proposal attempts to incorporate multiple perspectives offered, including ensuring a broader level of community engagement while retaining the efficiencies of a smaller building committee, recognizing staff's need to have a clear line of decision-making, ensuring continuity, while also recognizing board member interest and expertise, and preserving Portland's unique commitment to collaborative building projects with the city and school district. Staff's revised proposal calls for the establishment of a school building committee that is separate from the board's operations committee. The committee would be made up of 3 board members, 2 city councilors appointed by the Board of Education after having been identified by the board chair with council input, and 6 at-large members of the general public appointed by the board based on a school board appointments committee recommendation. School board and city council membership on this committee would be for the length of the committee or a councilor member's tenure on the board or council. If a member retires, resigns, or is not re-elected, the board chair would appoint a replacement. The committee would be co-chaired, as you heard this evening, by one of the members of the school board selected by the board chair from among the sitting board representatives on the building committee, and co-chaired by a member of the council selected by the board chair. The members of the public would be expected to continue to serve on the committee for as long as they remained a resident of Portland. Any vacancies among members of the public would be filled by the school board based on a recommendation from the board's appointments committee. The board charged staff to bring back a recommendation for the creation of advisory groups for each school building project. Subsequently, staff posted an application form online and disseminated it broadly. And I apologize, in some of the emails we received today, I said nearly 40 applicants, and I should have typed 30, so I just want to clarify that. So nearly 30 excuse me, applicants responded. The board's appointments committee, myself as chair, member Balfons, as well as Ms. Morioni, who is not here this evening, met on January 22nd and January 30th. After those meetings, the board held a workshop at the February 6th meeting to further discuss criteria that had been considered up to that point by the appointments committee. The Appointments Committee convened again on February 10th and 13th. At that time, the Appointments Committee reviewed all of the applicants using an agreed-upon criteria of the individual applicant's narrative response to the question of, and which was on the application, explain why you want to be a part of the building committee. The committee further reviewed candidates with the intention of having diverse viewpoints and perspectives, including gender and ethnic background. The following 6 at-large applicants were selected based on these review criteria. And I'm just going to mention their names with a brief synopsis. Some were had a lot more in their application, and so I have thanks to Tess, we have a very brief synopsis of each of the members that being recommended this evening. The first is Abigail Fuller. Abigail previously worked as a volunteer on the 4-school bond effort. She is passionate about ensuring that our public schools are the best they can be for our community's children. She believes that good schools are integral to a strong and vital city. She has 2 children attending Lyseth Elementary School, and she has 2 children, attending Lyseth Elementary School, and one that attends Portland High School. The second recommendation is Hamza Hadao. And Hamza is a strong advocate for renovating our schools for the children in our public schools. He is passionate about improving Portland schools for all learners. Hamza has 9 children. His children attend Presumpscot, Lyman Moore, Deering High School, and Casco Bay High School. Jennifer Hunter. Jennifer teaches high school Spanish in Sanford. She is interested in offering input from the perspective of a parent and educator. Jennifer has a child who attends King Middle School. Jessica Marino. Jessica has been involved in the Buildings for Our Future project from its first stages of development. Her main objectives are meeting the educational needs of students and educators while maintaining walkable neighborhood schools. As a speech-language pathologist working for Maine's Child Development Services, she provides special education services to pre-K students in Portland and South Portland. Jessica has 3 children, 1 at Longfellow Elementary School and the other 2 at Lincoln Middle School. Jay Norris. Jay is a professional project manager with a 20-year career managing large construction and technology infrastructure projects. Jay is not a parent and describes himself as independent and in no way connected to any group, construction agency, developer, financial institution, or specific service provider who might stand to benefit from the construction. He believes strongly in having modern, updated, safe, and cleaning learning environments and wants to serve the community by assisting in these projects. Matthew Winch. As the parent of 4 children, Matthew has been involved with the schools in various capacities. With 1 child still to enter the school district, he feels he has a long-term vested interest in the outcomes here and truly believes that these schools are a fundamental cornerstone to the strength of the school district and the city overall. 2 of his children attend Lyseth Elementary School in its Spanish Emergence program. And 1 attends Lyman Moore. I think there's only 1 child that is in the Spanish Emergent. 2 attend, 1 in Spanish, And 1 attends Lyman Moore Middle School. His 4th child will be entering Lyseth in the fall. And I have all of the members here this evening that we were going to be recommending. And if the board has any questions for them, but at the appropriate time, I would just have them come up after we approve them to introduce themselves.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Is there any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? Oh, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Ethan Strimling. I'm the mayor of the city of Portland, also a resident on Congress Street. I rise today just to offer some comments about a little bit about the process, which has been very frustrating for the public, dragged out a little bit longer than many people felt like it should have been dragged out. But in all honesty, there is also a real frustration in the community at the moment among those who were fighting so hard for the four-school bond to have seen their leader, who was going to be appointed by this board, then taken out. Especially since there are two of the people who were appointed to this board who were the leaders of the opposition, leaders of doing nothing. There was a strong feeling in the community that it would be important that we balance that. And when the first slate came forward, people felt better. Okay, now we have a real counterbalance. So it's frustrating that that's occurred, but we'll have to move on from that tonight. I would ask this board and the community and our new two co-chairs, who I have great confidence in, to keep a very diligent eye on this process. I serve on the Finance Committee now, and I can tell you the pressure around this four-school bond existed in our first meeting. We were presented with graphs at our first meeting showing how the impact of the four-school bond will put pressure on our debt. So that's the concern, that we're worried that we won't do everything in our power to make sure that this happens on time and on budget, and that there may be some who never thought we should have done this in the first place, who may be pulling back the reins and supporting that position. So tonight I'm simply here asking you to watch like we will watch, and to push like we will push. Because when this vote took place this fall, it was the largest margin of any election we had, of any side. Those who were trying to kill an issue or those who were trying to push an issue. It beat everything. That was how strong the public said, we want this done, we want it done now, and we are willing to pay for it. So thank you for your work going forward. I look forward to this process, and please feel free to come to me for anything that you may need. I will be watching as well, but I look forward to these four schools getting rebuilt in as timely a manner as possible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other public comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Obviously, I'm City Councilor Justin Costa, and as of earlier, apparently I was appointed co-chair of this board. So I'm very excited to get going on this work. As many of you know, I was on the school board for 6 years. I've been working on this for a very long time, along with Ms. Thompson and many others of you. I will just say that from my perspective, I think it's time for us to move forward. We certainly understand that there has been some contentiousness around this issue. For those of us that have worked on the broader campaign to try to get this done, what we've seen in the last few weeks is nothing compared to the substantive debates that we've been having about the issue of how we're going to address our elementary school needs for a period of many years. What is important is that all of us recognize that this work is moving forward. There is no uncertainty. We had the campaign, we had the vote, the public passed this, it passed it overwhelmingly. And everyone that I have spoken to is in the position of understanding that and understanding that we are working to move forward. I will say that personally, I have been an enormous champion for this work for a very long time, dating back to the initial preliminary plans that eventually became the first iteration of buildings for our future. I feel, as one member of this committee and as one of the co-chairs now, very comfortable with the membership that's being put forward, and I frankly would have supported a different slate if that was the will of the body as well. But I think it is important for everyone to understand that the people that are going to be on this committee are committed to this work. They are committed to moving it forward. And personally, as one of its co-chairs, I can say that I have utmost confidence in all of my colleagues that have been appointed to it. I have a very good relationship with Councillor Ray. I have a very good relationship with Ms. Thompson, with Ms. Davis. I have a very good relationship with Ms. Morioni. So many of you on the board, all of us are committed to seeing this work through. If there is any tension around this, if there is any lack of certainty, I will be the first one to bring forward those concerns. But I have seen nothing in my experience, I have heard nothing in my conversations that should cause anyone to be unsure or to have doubts about the direction in which we are moving. This issue was settled at the ballot box by the voters, and everyone is on the same page about moving forward to make sure that now, given the authority that the voters have granted us, that we move forward with the best set of projects, the best set of improvements that are going to give all of our students at Presumpscot and Lyseth and Longfellow and Reiki the kind of facilities that they need to be as successful as we can possibly make them in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll call for board discussion. Ms. Thompson.
I just want to publicly thank all of the almost 30 applicants that came forward and really encourage those that did apply to participate as we move through this process for the 4 schools. There'll be a lot of work for lots of people to do, especially based at the schools. So there isn't limited engagement. There's a lot of engagement that we can have. And I do particularly want to thank and acknowledge the Protect Our Neighborhood Schools for all of the work that they did and the people that worked on that campaign. There was a lot of very hard work. I would say blood, sweat, and tears, but that's probably not appropriate. But anyway, I did it anyway. But no blood. And we worked long hours, and I do want to thank the leader of that, Emily Figdor, who sacrificed quite a bit personally to have that initiative come forward. I remember meeting with her and Jeannie Swanton and pulling out the archives from my garage and going over it, and them pulling it all together and trying to make sense of where we've been, where we can go. And I have to give the Protect Our Neighborhood Schools full credit, as well as other community members, for finally getting this passed as politicians and getting it out to the voters to allow them to have their say. And as Mr. Coster and others have alluded to, it passed with flying colors, and it is no, I don't want to not acknowledge Ms. Figdor and Stephen as well, Stephen Beal and others that worked on that campaign, because they did work extremely hard. And I hope that others that were involved with that will stay engaged with the process, because we need as many people as possible. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comment? Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair. So just real quick, just wanted to add, so going to be one of the co-chairs for the committee, I'm also very excited and looking forward to working with the slate of community members that the appointments committee is going to bring forward or brought forward tonight. Like Councilor Costa said a moment ago, I'm really confident in our staff. I'm confident in the support that we're going to get for this project. And I did want to say that the process with which the appointments committee took on, particularly the second go-around, to get the 6 candidates out here. So I just wanted to commend the appointments committee, and specifically Ms. Thompson, on how she handled it. I think that after some concerns of the criteria that was used and the transparency were brought up, you really like stepped up, and from the communication with email and what I saw through those committee meetings, I thought it was just a stellar performance, and we should be really proud about how you conducted that and the 6 candidates that you brought forward today. And I look forward to supporting the slate of candidates. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Atkinson.
I just want to give voice to some frustration that I have actually with the process that this went through. I think communicating to some community members that they were going to be brought forward, and then having that having them then removed from the committee was not. I don't know what the best way to say this is. It was not a shining moment for this board, and I think that we a lot of this work started with this board, and getting it through to the council, and then eventually out to the voters, and so we came up with this plan in a lot of ways and pushed it forward and asked the community to rally around it. And I think that, we all received, I believe, a mountain of emails over the course of today expressing the frustration of the people who worked so hard to get us over that finish line and to be getting this done. And so to have someone like Emily, who was selected in the first round, and to have her and with her history with it, then removed. I think it's a shame, and I can imagine that she feels extremely frustrated, because I feel very frustrated as well with the way that that's gone down.
Any other comments? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of appointing 6 community members to the Buildings for Our Future Advisory Building Committee, as recommended by the board's appointment committee, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students in the affirmative.
Can we allow an opportunity for them to come to the microphone?
Yes,
Thank
please.
you.
So at this time, we'd like to invite the 6 members to come to the microphone and introduce yourself and say a few words.
Hi, I'm Abby Fuller. I'm really glad to have a chance to be part of this committee. I'm really excited to make all these changes to our schools happen after helping Emily work on the campaign, and excited to get going as fast as we can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Jessica Marino. I know all of you by now, and you know how passionate I am and how excited I am to finally get to work and make this happen. So thank you all very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jen Hunter, and I'm an interested citizen and parent and teacher, and I don't work in the Portland district. I work in the Sanford district, but I'm interested in becoming involved in the Portland school process, and I look forward to the opportunity of helping out any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Matthew Winch. I think, as Jess stated before me, I think everyone on this board pretty well understands my passion for rebuilding and getting these schools to a modern standard. It's been a long time coming, as Justin Costa noted, and really happy to be part of that work going forward. So happy that in the process of this, I've magically had a 4th child that I was not aware of until this evening. So I need to wind that back from your official record. I only have 3 children, one at Lyman Moore, one currently at Lyseth in the Spanish immersion program, and one entering in the autumn who will be in the Spanish immersion program.
Congratulations.
Good evening. My name is Hamza Hado. I'm one of the Portland residents, and I'm very passionate about those 4 school buildings. I have children who growing up, who were born and raised in Portland, Maine, who went to those schools. And I see those schools as my home. I don't see as schools only, but I see as my home. So thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Jay Norris, and I'm very excited about this. I did not have any children during this process, and I don't intend to have any. I wanted them, though. I wish I did. So in many ways, this is my way of giving back and helping what will be my future as well, even though I don't have kids. I evangelized for this. I'm not big on taking out bonds myself, but this was special. I evangelized for my neighborhood organization. I chair the largest, biggest neighborhood organization here in town. We worked on it. Ms. Vindel is my representative to the school board, so I want to thank her as well, and Ms. Thompson. So this is very important to me, and I realize my capacities here is to be an advisor to you and not to make any decisions on my own. So thank you for having me to be a part of it. It's important to me, and I'm at your service anytime you need me. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who just spoke. As I said in the beginning, it's a huge lift, and we are vastly excited to get the process started. So thank you. Okay. So we are into personnel. Consideration and action to approve the personnel items listed. Is there a motion? Mr. Atkinson, seconded by Mr. Balfonts. Would the superintendent like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. We have 2 items on the agenda today. First, I'm happy to announce that Boyd Marley is my selection for principal of East End Community School. Boyd is deeply devoted to the East End community and has been a part of it for a long time now. As you know, for this past year, Boyd has served as the interim principal, and in this role, he has shown himself to be a caring and capable administrator who is devoted to the success of East End Community School and its staff. Boyd was selected after an open search that included an interview with a team of East End staff under the leadership of Assistant Superintendent Jeannie Crocker, and subsequently, I interviewed him and observed him in practice at East End, and finally, he met with East End Community School parents to outline his vision for the school. Boyd holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Southern Maine in criminology and a master's degree in education from the University of New England. Before joining the Portland Public Schools, he was a special education teacher with the South Portland School Department for nearly 2 decades. During his time in South Portland, Marley taught at the middle school level at Mahoney and Memorial Schools and also at Kaler Elementary School. Many of you also know that Mr. Marley is also a former state legislator who served in the Maine House of Representatives from 2000 to 2008. I am extremely proud to recommend Boyd to you for this position. I believe his appointment will allow East End Community School to continue a positive trajectory.
Thank you. And are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none. There is no public comment where this is a personnel issue. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, Ms. Vindel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that personally I've known Boyd for as long as I've been on the school board, and I have just been a fan of his work at East End Community School as assistant principal, and now as I'm excited for this motion to come before us. Really, really cares about our kids, and I'm personally excited to hopefully have this be a solid principal for the East End community and Munjoy Hill community. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the personnel item listed, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Congratulations, Mr. Boyd, and welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm honored. Can't believe it.
So do you want me to go ahead? Or do you need a motion on that?
I think I need a motion. Consideration and action to renew the contracts of principals for the 2018-2019 school year who have been employed more than 2 years pursuant to MRSA Title 20A, Chapter 504, subsection 13301, Employment of Principals. Is there a motion? Mr. Balfont, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. And would the superintendent like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. This is our request for renewal of the contracts for principals who have been with the Portland Public Schools for more than 2 years. This is a requirement, an annual requirement brought forward by state regulations, and this is a list of all of the principals that are up for renewal this year. They're all amazing leaders, as you've all experienced, and I'm incredibly happy to have the opportunity to bring them forward for renewal.
Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, there is no public comment. Any board discussion? Seeing none, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of renewing the contracts of principals for the 2018-2019 school year who have been employed more than 2 years pursuant to MRSA Title 20A, Chapter 504, subsection 13301, Employment of Principals, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting in the affirmative. Consideration and action to renew the contracts of principals for the 2018-2019 school year who have been employed 2 years or less pursuant to MRSA Title 20A, Chapter 504, subsection 13301, Employment of Principals. Ms. Thompson has made the motion, seconded by Mr. Atkinson. Would the superintendent like to speak to this motion?
So again, more of the same. This is an amazing group of new principals that we have the honor and pleasure to work with every day, and so I'm incredibly proud to bring them forward for renewal. These are principals that have been employed with us for less than 2 years, so they're our newer school leaders.
Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of renewing the contracts of principals for the 2018-2019 school year who have been employed 2 years or less pursuant to MRSA Title 20A, Chapter 504, subsection 13301, Employment of Principals, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students in the affirmative. And that brings us to board focus on educational issues. We have a whole student update. Would the superintendent like to speak to this?
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Over the past few months, we've been bringing focus on educational issue topics to you to bring to your attention work that is happening in the district that is directly related to the comprehensive plan. Previous topics have included our pre-kindergarten work, our parent engagement work, our co-curricular programming, and most recently, our work at Portland Arts and Technology High School. One of the most innovative aspects of the Portland Promise was the recognition that as a district, we are responsible for educating the whole student. That was represented by having a goal specifically labeled that way, and I can tell you that this grew out of the urging of our educators because they've known that this is an important part of what they do, but one where they feel sometimes least confident and where they rightly, in my opinion, feel that they get the least credit. Some of our strategies in the goal are focused on ensuring that every student in our schools has at least one meaningful connection with a caring adult, and that we develop our educators' knowledge and skills in developing responsive classrooms and trauma-informed practices. In this, our whole student goal is very much consistent with our equity goal. Portland Public Schools does a tremendous amount of work in this area and has tremendous partnerships with community partners to advance this work, whether it's the district's commitment to social workers in all of our buildings, our reasonable counselor-to-student ratios, our crews, bulldog blocks, and WIN advisories, or the mentors and volunteers who work with our students. I'm proud of the work that happens in this area. We've started to do much more. With your support and the support of partners such as ConnectEd, which seeded the creation of our Director of Social Emotional Learning Brian Kavanaugh, whom you'll hear from today, or JMG, whom along with Nellie May, the Nellie May Educational Foundation has underwritten some of the amazing student extended learning and capstone projects you will also be hearing about, as well as many others. Our whole student goal is that 95% of our students and families will feel valued and supported in our schools. And tonight, Assistant Superintendent for Teaching and Learning, Malia Nally, will guide us through an overview of the work that is helping us to achieve this goal.
Okay. Hello. So like the superintendent mentioned, our aim tonight is to share an update on our progress against the whole student goal. For those of you who have been on the board for a while, I wanted to note that in the past we've heard a monthly update from each of our schools about their plan. And this year, moving forward, our intention is to share examples of the work in our schools by connecting them to our collective work on the Portland Promise goals. So tonight I'm going to be the MC by helping to reground you all in the different prongs of our strategy, and I'll be inviting several other people to join me up here to help paint a more clear picture of how some of this work is looking and being experienced on the ground in our schools and with our students. So thanks in advance to the team behind me that's here to help share their stories. As a reminder, our goal is that all PPS students will develop the skills, habits, and mindsets they need to engage in and contribute to our diverse city and ever-changing world. I think based on the conversations we've all had over the past year, I know you all believe in the importance of the whole student and social emotional learning. There's ample research that points to the importance of social emotional learning as being essential to academic success and overall success in college, career, and life. Here you see an example of the research base that indicates social emotional competence is predictive of success in college and beyond. This particular study concluded that early pro-social skills decrease the likelihood of living in public housing, receiving public assistance, having any involvement with police before adulthood, and ever spending time in a detention facility. So the bottom line is that tending to the whole student is critical for ensuring our students are prepared and empowered for successful long-term outcomes in life. So to remind you, we set out to pursue 4 key strategies with the launch of the Portland Promise. This year we focused our work on 3 of those 4 key strategies, which are listed here. The first is to adopt shared language around social emotional learning outcomes and to ensure that each school has a strategy for teaching and developing students in pursuit of those outcomes. The second strategy is to ensure each Portland Public School student has a meaningful connection to a caring adult. And third is to ensure all students have access to music, the arts, languages, physical education, and expanded learning opportunities by strengthening these programs and growing community partnerships. So, to start our update on the work that's been happening, I'm going to invite our Director of Social Emotional Learning, as the superintendent mentioned, Dr. Brian Kavanaugh, to talk about the work that's underway to develop a coherent district-wide strategy around social emotional learning. And after he gives a high-level overview of the progress to date, Ann Hanna, our principal at Riverton, will share how this is looking on the ground in her school. So, Brian.
Thank you for having me. So I want to spend a few minutes just talking about the strategy that we have outlined, what we've been developing the last several months, and then working towards implementation. It's been really exciting work, and I've just been struck by how passionate the staff and the schools are, both administrators and teachers in this area. So it's made my job very fun, exciting, and interesting, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. So early on in our work, we decided we needed to make sure we had clear shared outcomes. That's one of the key strategies in the Portland Promise around whole student, is having common outcomes across the district. And we selected a framework that has been developed over a couple of decades by CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And they found through years of research and a high number of studies that there are really 3 clusters of skills that we feel that students need need to have to be successful adults. And just to quickly summarize the CASEL framework, the red are skills that pertain to you as an individual, kind of internal to you. The blue are those skills that are external, and the green is taking those skills, putting them all together, and making decisions that benefit both you and the community around you, which is responsible decision-making skills. What's interesting about this is that just about anything an educator does can fall within social-emotional learning. Earlier, when we're talking about Indigenous Peoples Day, social awareness is a key construct that helps us understand why we might want to make that decision. So we agreed on these outcomes as critically important. This doesn't prescribe what to do, how to do it, or when. It just says these are the outcomes that we care about, and we're going to design systems and practices and supports to ensure that we can get there. One way that we're hoping to do that is to make sure that we collect data that helps us understand where we are and where we want to go. And we have settled on several metrics that we feel are important to understand our progress in the area of social emotional learning and to have consistent measures across schools. This in no way captures all of the information and data that our schools collect throughout the school year, but these are some common metrics that we know we can collect across the district to have some a sense of where we are in our progress to date. One measure is a school climate survey that has been named the School Climate Survey by the developers. And it is a measure that will actually have students, we have students taking starting next week to assess the climate of their school, the level that they feel safe, to which they have a connection to an adult, to which they feel that their environment is geared up and ready for learning. There's also a parent survey that will get at similar issues. We'll take a look at other data that we already have, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel in terms of discipline data, special education referral data related to social and emotional needs, as well as, and this is probably more of a longer-term goal, is to have systematic screening for social and emotional risk to ensure that we're catching those kids early that we know need the support both socially and emotionally across the district. And once we have those outcomes, we have those measures, we want to design a system that's actually going to support students. I'm going to not break the rules of PowerPoint and read this slide to you, but the big idea behind this graphic is the notion of multi-tiered systems of support. So MTSS for short is simply a way of organizing the practices that we know work to support the students with a level of intervention that they need. That is the big idea behind the triangle. We want to organize what we're doing, be efficient with our time and resources, and deliver the support to students in an effective way. We know that some students need a lot of social and emotional support, but every student needs at least a little bit of social emotional support. So we want to organize our resources and time effectively to do that. And we believe that MTSS, through years of research, is the best way to do that. And there are also several schools in the district, as Anna Hannah will highlight, that are already using parts of MTSS to support their students in effective ways. This year, one of our major contributions to SEL has been district-wide professional development. In particular, we focused a lot of our efforts early on at the elementary level. The staff at the elementary level has been introduced to the CASEL framework, so they know those 5 areas as the common outcomes that we care about. They have been introduced to multi-tiered systems of support, although again, a lot of them already know about it because many of those practices are happening in our schools already, although not to the extent that we want. That's why I want to work to scale up. And then most recently, we had a professional development day in February where we said to teachers, you know, this work is hard. Part of social emotional learning is to find ways to take care of yourself and develop your own social emotional well-being. So we offered several sessions that are listed there to support teachers with thinking about what are ways that you can support yourself socially and emotionally to do this really hard, rewarding, yet challenging work that we are asking you to do. So that's another significant focus that we are paying attention to also in concert with human resources. So I'm going to turn over to Ann Hannah, who has been an absolute pleasure to work with in the district around these issues, to talk about some of the great work happening at Riverton.
So our focus on social emotional learning at Riverton is important because it's really helping us to improve our students' positive social behaviors and reduce conduct problems. And it's also helping us to teach students to understand and manage their emotions and their stress. And it's helping students to be able to feel and to show empathy towards others. But most importantly, it's helping our students really be ready for learning. So at Riverton this year, we're really focusing on strengthening our existing foundation of SEL practices at the Tier 1 or universal levels throughout the school by really trying to implement second step, PBIS, and now some mindfulness strategies across the school. So second step is a evidence-based social skills curriculum that uses explicit lessons to teach students social and emotional skills. Teachers at every grade level are teaching the weekly lessons in all of our classrooms and have had some professional development this year from Barrett, actually, to help us really strengthen our implementation of the second step curriculum. The lessons are helping our students to be able to identify their feelings, learn how to take the perspective of others, learn how to problem solve conflicts with their peers, and how to develop some responsible decision-making skills. We're finding that the second step curriculum has been really effective in helping our students to establish and maintain strong relationships and connections with others. This year, we're starting a smaller sort of second step social skills group with some of our third graders. This group is called our Second Step Superstars, and it's run by our school social worker, Amanda Atkinson-Lewis. The students who are selected to participate in our Second Step Superstars are students that benefit from the pre-teaching of these concepts in more of a small group setting. So the Second Step Superstars meet once a week during their lunch with the social worker, and they follow the same second step curriculum that all of the rest of the third grade is following. But these guys are getting the material 1 week ahead. And so what they're doing is that then when they become like the experts of the lesson, so that when the lesson is taught back in the third grade, they are the superstars, and they are helping their peers be able to understand the concepts. So Riverton is also a PBIS school, and PBIS stands for Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports. And it's helping us to establish and maintain a safe learning environment where everyone is feeling empowered to teach and to learn. So PBIS is proactive, it's collaborative, it's an approach to teach and reinforce appropriate behaviors across all school settings. One of the important underlying beliefs of PBIS is that appropriate behaviors and social skills requires direct instruction, just as the same as reading, writing, or math skills. The 4 school-wide expectations for behavior that we are explicitly teaching and holding students accountable for at Riverton are just simply to be safe, be respectful, be responsible, and be cooperative. We have an active PBIS team at Riverton that meets regularly to analyze behavioral data and to determine which areas or specific behaviors we need to target within our school. This year, we've had help from Brian to help us really refine our implementation of our Tier 1 or our universal supports in the classrooms. Our teachers are working hard at pre-teaching those behavioral expectations and then providing lots of positive and specific praise to students when they meet those expectations, but also providing feedback and redirection when problem behaviors are occurring. And then also new this year is that we're implementing some mindfulness strategies, working with a mindfulness instructor to help teach our students ways to self-regulate. Students are learning practices that are helping them to calm down when their emotions are feeling very strong, using some deep breathing strategies or what we call belly breathing. We're also helping them to learn how to increase their focus through attentive listening, which helps them to reduce distractions while the teacher is teaching. So in addition to these SEL strategies that we're working on throughout the school, we also have our civil rights team working to help all our students feel welcome and respected at our school. We also have a partnership with the Locker Project to support families who might be experiencing food insecurity.
And we've now this year have developed 3 different walking school bus routes to get more students to be able to get to school and increase their attendance. So as a school, Riverton, we are very excited. We're encouraged by the district's focus on social emotional learning and the whole student. And we will continue to work hard on implementing these practices across our school. A challenge we are facing is in how best to support the small number of students, the ones that are at the top of the red of the triangle that Brian was showing, who have maybe some specific or intensive problems with behavior that can sometimes really prevent them from being ready to learn. And we're getting better at creating individual behavior support plans for students, but we need help with those Tier 2 and Tier 3 strategies to, for those students who may be experiencing trauma or might have some mental health issues. So we really appreciate the guidance that Malia and Brian and Barrett have been providing to us as a school and supporting the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Brian and Ann, and you all should go check out Riverton and what they're doing. It's really incredible to see what Ann and all of her team are doing there at the school. So next, I want to introduce the Caring Adult Connections Strategy. So here again, there's just literally hundreds of studies that speak to the impact of that student-teacher relationship on student engagement. And we thought it would be helpful to point out that the effects of that are particularly large in the higher grades. I think some of us, including myself initially, might have assumed that you can imagine the importance of that nurturing relationship at the elementary school. You picture that with the students, but I think what we've seen in these studies is that it's especially important at the middle and high school level as well. And so this work needs to be considered K through 12. Let me pause on that. So one of the strategies here is honestly just the amazing relationships, the instincts and skills that our teachers have that they use every day in building relationships with their students. It's interesting to see some of our schools are actually doing some explicit professional development on that relationship building with their teachers. I got to observe a session at the Lyman Moore Middle School where Brian was actually there in partnership with Ben Donaldson, the principal, talking about the importance of the relationships, sharing some really concrete strategies for being consistent and intentional about building those strategies, thinking especially about making sure no student drops through the cracks. So in addition to that, another way that we think about this and get at it is through mentorship. And so we have several different mentorship programs. Here's a snapshot of a handful of them that are happening across our schools. These programs really leverage our own teachers and staff, as well as community partners to kind of expand the team of adults who can engage directly with our students. In addition, some of the programs leverage that peer-to-peer mentorship relationship, which we find has a positive impact on our mentees as well as those who are mentoring. So now we're going to hear a couple of stories about this Caring Adult Connection work in action. So first I'm going to invite Blanca Santiago forward. She's one of our social workers on the multilingual team and supports students who are from immigrant and refugee backgrounds. And she's going to share a brief update on how our new arrivals program at the middle school level prioritizes these caring adult connections as well as the peer mentoring relationships. So,
thank you. I'm happy to be here. So King Middle School has a new arrivals program. It's a fairly new program for students who have come from different countries or are now coming here for the first time, newly arrived with basically no formal education or very interrupted education in their own sending communities, or sometimes they're coming from Syria or Turkey, have been in refugee camps, or have moved from one place to another, and for those reasons just have not had a very solid academic experience. In addition to that, many times they've experienced also lots of trauma, the kinds of trauma that come with all of those things. And so when we get them at the new arrival center, they meet that criteria for being in that center. It really is a classroom. The classroom is about the size of where you're sitting right now, and there are 8 students. And the 8 students you can see some of them there, are delightful middle school students who come eager to learn, but with some learning deficits. And so there's a lot of intensive ELL instruction, but also just a lot of need for connection in that classroom. So one of the things that we've done is we've partnered with Make It Happen, reached out to Make It Happen, and also have put out to the community at large a need for volunteers or mentors to come into the classroom and really kind of just be with these kids. And what I like best about this is that with Make It Happen, Deering High School really stepped up. Megan Ramp at Deering High School really stepped up and has referred students to work with our students. And so that there is a very rich experience that's happening between these middle school students and these high school students whose experiences were possibly very much the same or similar, and who also share the same language, or maybe they share the same cultural background, or maybe they share the same country of origin. We also have some adults from the community who have stepped up and come into the classroom, and they just kind of like stay with the kids for an hour or so during the day. Or see them after school. And you can see, I think you can see it even in the photograph, that there's just a really good, rich connection. I really want to echo what was said about how important it is in the higher grades. It's a really important thing to feel also that somebody who looks like you is actually helping you, someone who shares your experience, also is there with you and bridging that gap. So, yeah, that's the program, and I'm hoping that it grows, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Blanca. Next, Tim Cronin is going to come up. He's the program director of the Make It Happen program, and he's going to give just a brief explanation of what the program is, and then introduce 3 students who are here to speak about the impact of that program on them.
Thank you so much for having us here tonight. My name, again, is Tim Cronin, and I oversee a program called Make It Happen, which is an academic support and college readiness program for multilingual students. And just in case you don't know all of this, we're in place at Portland's 3 high schools and 3 middle schools. And thank you so much for your support and keeping us floating for over the last few years. And so in light of budget season, I thought it was important, and in speaking with Grace Valenzuela, we thought it'd be important and prudent to hear from the clients or the beneficiaries of your direction and your support. And so I thought we'd have 3 of our students speak to you tonight. Quickly, what we do is we help students build their academic profile so that they're hopefully competitive for whichever career path they wind up choosing. Typically, in 99% of the cases, it's going to college, and importantly, helping them to secure the financial resources to do so. And so I thought we'd have 3 of our students from Deering High School. There's Paul Kana. From Deering High School again, there's Krista Agatore. They're both seniors. And then last but not least, and here, her name is Fatima Haji. And so they're going to be here. They're going to tell you a little bit about why they think the program is important, and hopefully the impact it's had on their lives, and why we think that you should support it. Okay, that's it? All right, so Paul, you're up.
Well, as you said, my name is Paul Connor. I moved to the United States in 2015. I'm pretty new here, and I started Make It Happen in my sophomore year, way back in 2006. So I'm pretty knowledgeable of what happens in Make It Happen. And Make It Happen has helped me with a lot of things, like stretch out to the community through volunteering activities. And Make It Happen brings to the light programs like Ripple Effect that I wouldn't have known about, and it was great to experience that. Ripple Effect, I think most of you might know, is like a camping program where we do like environmental leadership. So it's one of the main goals of Make It Happen is to create leadership in the the new coming students. Make It Happen also helps me academically. Like they support us by providing us with mentors. My mentor, specifically, her name is Taylor. She goes to USM. She's a biology major, and she moved from Massachusetts. And I'm also trying to be a biology major at University of Maine, Orono. And I already got accepted with the help of Make It Happen. And I received a great financial aid. And I'm looking forward to going there. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, my name is Krista Gatore, as you said. I'm a senior at Deering High School and I'm in the program too. And I'm new here, I got here last year. And I'm an asylum seeker, so it's not easy for me to get, because I'm not FAFSA eligible or all of that, but Make It Happen helps me to get it. And they help me through the classes and everything I don't understand. Like they have tutors who comes and help us with everything we need. And there's also a program for mentoring. There is also a mentoring program. The good thing about that mentoring program is that it helps the student, like the new student, like the sophomores and the freshmen that are new and are multilingual students, so they help them understand, and we're part of it. So if a student is like, I would say, if a student is a sophomore, so he's new, he doesn't know a lot about it, so we just help them through the things we learn from Make It Happen and all of that. So yeah.
Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Fatima Haji, and I'm a sophomore at Deering High School, and I am part of the Make It Happen program. This is why the Make It Happen program is so important for for me, and the multilingual students. Every week, I stay after school with a tutor named John Dodge. He helps me out with my biology and chemistry homework, and I also do USM STEM opportunities with Sarah Chang, and also like there's a list of activities that I have done and still doing because of the Make It Happen program. Cultivating community, the telling room, University of New England's Health Science Leadership Program, Maine Medical Explorers, Mercy Hospital Junior Volunteer Program, and the Make It Happen is part of it too, the activities. And last year when I was a freshman, I was part of Roy Moore's mentorship program, and I was the mentee, and I had a great mentor, and she was great. I loved her. And I think Make It Happen is like the best place to be because it feels like at home, and it helps you out with your homework, your college application, and sometimes they do like job applications when you're searching for jobs. Yeah, I'm gonna be 16 soon. Can't wait. And I'm so glad to be part of that community. Yeah.
I think that they do deserve a round of applause, whatever the rules. Thank you all very, very much. So finally, we're going to talk just briefly about the expanded learning opportunities strategy. So when we talk about expanded learning opportunities, we're referring to a range of opportunities that we offer our students beyond the traditional content areas you might think of. So this includes the arts, sports, and world languages. It includes an incredible set of options we have at Paths. It includes the concept of anytime, anywhere learning that's done in coordination with community partners and businesses. So these opportunities can't happen without the incredible array of partnerships we have with businesses, cultural institutions, and nonprofit partners. And we recognize that we're especially fortunate to be located in this thriving city, and so we genuinely see the whole city as an extension of the classroom for our students. So we have two examples of this work in action to share with you. The first is, excuse me, a snapshot of our Pathways program. So Eric Moynihan and Pam Bessie are the Pathways coordinators at Portland High School and Deering High School, and they created this video to illustrate the Pathways program that they wanted to share with you. So, where's Henry? Hopefully I can put this up.
Portland Pathway Coordinators are instrumental in growing community partnerships for students. They coordinate senior capstones and internships that inspire students and connect them with caring adults in the community. Students are taken out of their comfort zones and through these experiences add skills and networks for their personalized success plans. These real-life experiences also give them an opportunity to share with an authentic audience. Pathway coordinators work as project managers for interdisciplinary class projects as they take care of the planning and logistics for workshops and panels of community experts to share their expertise and be authentic audiences. Students in global issues classes have a take action requirement for service learning. The Pathway coordinator creates opportunities for students to fulfill their take action requirement by acting as the school community liaison and often actively participating with the students as the experiences are often very new for students. This is another example of students working with caring adults in the community and students developing skills for personal success. The Pathway Coordinator connects global issues class students with senior capstone class students to collaborate on their Take Action projects, and also with community members for continued ELOs and potential jobs. Pathway Coordinator organizes all aspects of the annual Financial Literacy Fair, Reality Check workshops, and voter registration drive for the entire senior class. Pathway Coordinator organizes opportunities like Eggs and Issues with the Good Shepherd Food Bank and learning fair trade practices at Coffee by Design. Written by the Pathway Coordinator created an opportunity for over 40 alternative ed and ELL students to participate in healthy foods cooking classes. The Win Bulldog block time has been used for ELOs such as creating business plans with SCORE, resume writing with the Career Center, healthcare careers with UNE, entrepreneurship with Junior Achievement, and CPR training with the Portland Fire Department. The Pathway Coordinator organized college trips for sophomores and the Lunch and Learn program for increasing student voice. Pathway coordinators developing strong community partnerships have been critical in the success of the practice interview program for students. Pathway coordinators are instrumental in making career exploration opportunities happen, whether it's the tech team pulling a live show together with the New England School of Communication, interning in an engineering firm for a STEM endorsement, participating in a USM chemistry lab, exploring STEM careers at the Maine State Museum on STEM Career Day, speaking with Bill Nemitz at the Portland Press Herald, exploring virtual reality at the USM CSI lab, or learning about careers at UNM. Pathway coordinators are the keystone in connecting students with caring community partners.
Great. And then finally, I'm going to invite forward Carlos Gomez, who has taught in the district for 18 years and is our new Director of Language Development as of this summer. And he's going to share a little bit about the progress on the Seal of Biliteracy and how that connects to this idea of expanded learning opportunities as well as the whole student.
Thank you, Malia, and thank you for inviting me to participate in this. And I would have loved another round of that video. That was that was great. In my current and in my former roles, I've supported the whole child development of our students by promoting their proficiency in world languages. As a district, we are well positioned to make biliteracy a reality for many of our students. Our students have the opportunity to study languages starting in elementary school, and many of our students come to us already fluent in other world languages. By high school, our students have the opportunity to dive deep and learn further proficiency in 5 of the most widely spoken languages in the world: English, French, Spanish, Arabic, Chinese, as well as other languages, American Sign Language, and Latin. The seal of biliteracy is an objective measure that determines a student's proficiency in English and other world languages. It is widely recognized among employers and secondary education institutions. We've piloted for the past 2 years the seal of biliteracy, or at least an exam for the world language aspect of it. And this year is our first implementation year. Very excited. So March and April are going to be very busy. We're hoping to have 40 to 50 of our students demonstrate proficiency in or attempt the seal of biliteracy and achieve it. We will be working with our advanced world language students as well as our English language learners to support them in that endeavor. As you know, proficiency and fluency in another language can be a tremendous source of cultural pride and individual achievement. The benefits of language acquisition and brain development have been widely researched. The prospects of future employment and career opportunities for bilingual and multilingual graduates are well known. The seal of biliteracy will have a great impact on our students' sense of self-worth, on their identity, and sense of achievement. It's a great resource in the development of the whole child. And on behalf of many of our world language learners and English language learners across the district, I'd like to thank the school board and our community for support around this important initiative. So, thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. So in closing, we know that building an education system that considers the whole student and explicitly develops social-emotional skills is essential for our students' success with academics and long-term outcomes. Here you can see that the return on the investment is significant. I think if I recall from the beginning of it, for every $1 invested, there's an $11 return. So with that, we wanted to acknowledge that a significant portion of these efforts are being funded or supported by community foundations, partners, and businesses. So in particular, we want to thank ConnectEd with a generous donation from the Gorman Foundation for fully funding our effort to build a coherent district-wide social-emotional learning strategy by enabling us to hire Dr. Kavanagh, convene a social-emotional learning committee across the district, provide professional development for teachers, and to bring on Barrett Wilkinson as our equity specialist. We also want to acknowledge the Nellie Mae Foundation for enabling the career pathways opportunities at the high school level, the Cohen Foundation for providing the seed money to start Make It Happen, and the Portland Education Foundation for funding Culture Club. And then there's many other businesses and community partners who are involved in creating these opportunities for our students. So with that, we want to take some questions. I want to introduce, there's a few more folks here in the audience. Susan Wiggin, you want to raise your hand? She's one of our social workers. She supports students who are homeless and leads the multicultural student family group that was one of the bullets on one of those, on the mentoring slide. Roy, no, Chatterjee. That's what I thought, but I heard Roy Moore, and so I got.
No, that's the Alabama.
Okay, Chatterjee. So you're really famous. So he coordinates the peer mentor programs at Deering and Lincoln. Barrett Wilkinson. Many of you know our equity specialist and partners with Brian on our social emotional learning strategy as well as on many of these programs. And then Grace Valenzuela, you all know, and she oversees many of the programs that we just talked about as well. So everybody who shared as well as the rest of the folks I just introduced are all here, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have.
Question?
I'll just say thank you so much to everybody for all of your hard work. That was quite a wide array of offerings, and it seems like there's a lot of energy and a lot of really amazing things happening. So I have some more questions, but maybe I'll let other people take a shot while I look. You want me to go ahead? Let's see. Anybody else have something in the meantime? Okay. So if nobody else is ready, on the evaluation and data slide, there was some. I was particularly looking at the discipline data, and I was wondering if there's any sort of timeline on when we could expect to see some results from that.
So for this year's data collection, we're really treating it as a baseline year, and we can look historically at things like suspensions, but for all those data points, our hope is to look at data this year kind of as a baseline to help us problem solve and organize what we want to do going forward. So June would be the earliest that most of that data, the school climate data will come in March and April, and then the other data will be available, at the end of the school year.
Great.
Any other questions or comments? Roberta?
Perfect, thank you. So first of all, thank you so much for presenting tonight. It's like you guys are like this all-star team in the district, one of the all-star teams that we have. Don't really have very many questions other than, well, I guess I'll get the question out of the way. For the seal of biliteracy, Carlos, I think you said you're expecting somewhere like 40 students. Hopefully, will be able to apply for it.
Right. We're prioritizing seniors and juniors as well as sophomores who are currently in the highest level of language that they're taking, so that they can take they can apply and take the exams this coming March and April. So I'm hoping to have about 70 students apply, and hopefully have about 40 to 50 students maybe that would be able to demonstrate that biliteracy this year.
All 4 of the high school seniors.
Yes, it's
yes. Can apply. Excellent. That's really exciting. And so I just wanted to share. To what Blanca was talking about, the Newcomer Center. I had a chance with the superintendent to visit the Newcomer Center shortly after we first put it together. So I got a chance to meet a few of the students, and then a few weeks later went back to King for something else, and one of the students was there and recognized me. And it struck me how like just from that one quick visit, because like Blanca, you said, all they really want to do is just make a connection. So from that one quick visit, which was what we spent 10 minutes in that classroom, I come back the next time and I'm standing outside of the doors at King Middle School, and the student sees me and he runs over to the door and he opens it for me, which we might not want to encourage our students to just open the door, but the student says, no, this is Roberto, he's my friend. So it's like, it's cool, I can open the door for him. But it was just out of that one short little visit. So, I mean, it really is, it's such important work that you guys do to make those connections with the students, and clearly it makes a world of a difference. Yeah. So just kudos to you guys. I can't imagine how challenging it is what you guys do, but keep it up for real.
Thank you. Thank you for your support.
Anyone else? Jenna?
I just wanted to piggyback on Mr. Atkinson's question, and more so just kind of dig into it a little bit as a comment and request for additional information that around the data, especially student discipline, if that's something that we could get as you are progressing the data collection, if we can get in some annual report, as appropriate, as strategies, as things in the district are changing, making sure that we have an understanding as a board. How is the district reacting to the data collection that you're seeing on the ground? That would be great.
Yeah, definitely. And we do already collect this data and have it. So I think part of what Brian's speaking to is our goal is to collect and synthesize this data in a really easy, just-in-time digestible way so that it's at people's fingertips. We have a leadership dashboard, which we've just started to roll out. And we started with some of our attendance data. Some of this discipline and behavioral data will be in there as well. There is some stuff we're working with, some noise in the data, if we will, in terms of people's different interpretations of how some of this gets collected, but other things like discipline things are collected and disaggregated by race and English language learning, special education services, all those sorts of things. So absolutely, we can do that and definitely intend to do that.
I had a follow-up question on the multi-tiered instructional support, and just wondering if that's kind of, I know that schools have adopted positive behavioral interventions systems, and kind of wondering how, is that a part of it, or is that something completely different, kind of the acronym soup that we get thrown, like
the MTSS, PBIS. Yeah.
If you can differentiate, because I do know how PBIS is applied at a school setting.
Yeah.
And I'm familiar with the professional practices, though I think and I think board members have kind of different knowledge base depending on which committees they sat on, which presentations they were a part of, but
yeah.
The MTIS is a little new to me, so.
Multiple tiered systems of support. I mean, if you are familiar with PBIS, that's an example of a multi-tiered system of support. So I think the big idea is that, and then I'll give my version, which is maybe the version that would be good for you all, but Brian can give you every single component if you want some more of those details. But basically that idea Brian spoke to, that there should be intentional structures and design for Tier 1 for everybody across the whole school. And then there's Tier 2, Tier 3, Anne spoke about this as well in terms of what they're doing at Riverton, that become increasingly individualized and kind of more intensive in the supports that exist. And so PBIS is a very well-researched approach to doing a multi-tiered system of support. And so personally, I kind of interchange them sometimes. But I think if you get PBIS, you get the big idea of MTSS, which is the multi-tiered systems of support. Would you say that's fair? Okay.
Anyone else?
I have a question about the mentorship programs. Do all these programs fall under like one director or one person at the district, or are they kind of more independent? And if they are more independent, is there any kind of like lessons learned like that they can share amongst each other?
Yeah, I mean, Grace, if you want to speak to this, I think most of the programs fall into Grace's function in thinking about community partnerships. I think there's some connection to some of the work in the social emotional learning and the teaching and learning team, which is good and by design, but I think Grace is probably most of the bulk of the programs would connect into her and that team most directly. And what was the second part of your question, Mark?
Is there like lessons learned amongst the different programs that they can like share on like tips? You know?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that at all, Grace?
They're actually very integrated. If you notice that the students talked about, I was with Mr. Chatterjee when I was a freshman year. So there is really a lot of connection within the program. So if we are going to do debrief in terms of what's working with one, then, that's just one thing that we do regularly. But the bottom line is you really just need a concerned, caring adult in the vicinity of the student to blossom.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Tim?
Yeah, thanks. I was going to ask about the second step curriculum. Is that only at Riverton?
No, Barrett, can you do the quick off the top of your head, or maybe it's easier which ones don't have it yet?
Let's
Mike.
see.
You have to be on the mic.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I think Lyseth and Longfellow, the islands, have not had access to those resources. So in my previous work, when I was with the City of Portland Public Health, and we had grant that funded that, we had a bunch of schools sign on early, and I kind of that's where that grant funding went earlier on. So we have those handful of schools that haven't had resources specifically for Second Step yet. But the other schools, I would say, have pretty school-wide use of Second Step. Basically in every classroom has those resources, just like Anne had described for Riverton.
And that's elementary and then middle, Lincoln?
Yeah, Lincoln has piloted and used components of the middle school Second Step curriculum. They're the only middle school that's used that. There isn't a high school version of Second Step as of yet. Yeah.
Great. So it sounds like we're really happy with it and expanding it out to the whole district.
You know, I'm sure there are issues. I don't hear about that. I mean, maybe principals get that. You know, when I'm doing sort of the technical assistance work around Second Step, it's really, really a very positive curriculum. It takes some orientation, but after that, it's really designed for teachers and schools to take ownership and for it to be very sustainable. You know, sometimes we have to buy new materials because we've kind of beaten up the materials, but like other than that, it really is designed for sustainability.
Great.
And I would just add two quick things to that. One, I mean, by having Barrett and Brian and others on the team, we're able to really ensure that kind of consistency. So it's not just on the principal to, oh, you have somebody new. Like, we can send Barrett out to work with a new teacher, with a team of teachers to make sure folks are oriented to the program. And I'll also just say that we're in the midst of trying to do some creative work in our current budget and looking at our title grants and things like that to see if we can make that available to the remaining schools that are not yet implementing if they want.
Great.
Yeah.
The other question I had was around family engagement and how much we take this social emotional learning that our students are doing and share that with parents and siblings and other family members. I guess what positive effects that could have on the community, and then just, you know, reinforcing that families could do. So.
Susan, I say answer to that.
Okay, I got my moment. Yes, hi, I'm Susan Wiggett. I'm one of the social workers for the district. I'm so happy you asked this question. So we get to, this sort of came together, the multicultural groups have just come together in a larger way this year. They're being held at East End, Reiki, Hall, and Ocean Avenue. It's a 12-week curriculum for students that were either born in a different country or their families were born in a different country. And it was created by the Refugee and Immigrant Trauma and Resilience Center at Boston Children's Hospital. And we've been contracting with Spurwink this year to help us roll it out. The answer to your question in terms of the 12 weeks that are happening within the schools during the school year, school day, is an incredible engagement with the kids. And then for every 12-week session, there are 3 distinct family nights, and we have incredible dinners together. We formulated partnerships with Wayside and Standard Baking, who are supporting these beautifully homemade, incredible dinners that we gather for. We play together. It doesn't matter how much language anybody has, and it's really quite exceptional to see mothers, fathers, babies, people bring their middle school siblings and their older siblings, and sometimes I don't know who's there, but it doesn't matter because we welcome everybody. It's like, come on in, you want to play, you want to eat, we're here. So that's a really strong family engagement that we're very intentional about. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And I just want to plug, Parent University is doing has the programming tomorrow, and we're doing Angst. And again, that is in the pillar of social emotional learning. So we want to make sure that our parents understand issues related to social emotional health of their children and how to support them at home. So that is another way that we interact with families and provide them some support.
Yeah, and I was just at one other example. I was at the Portland Empowered meeting. I think you were there that night potentially when some of the parents at Deering, I think, brought up the fact that, Brian, you came and did a session with parents that I think probably you guys connected through. So, you know, those are some examples of how we're trying to make those connections. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Anything?
Just one quick question. It's obviously still not familiar with all the programming that we have. Can you tell me about Ripple Effect? I know it's like one of the...
Yeah, I just got my son into the camp. Does anyone feel like a ripple effect? You look like you are a ripple. Sure. I know some.
I'm in my canoe and kayak. So ripple effect, I'm not sure how long they've been around, but I know they have a deep footprint in Portland, especially among parents and families of young children. They, in the summertime, have sort of a kayaking program, so they kayak to different islands in Casco Bay, and they do a lot of team building, and it's a week of outdoors, a week of camaraderie, and the students really come back transformed and excited about new friendships, about their experiences. So it's I think families and children come from all around.
Can I just add one clarification on that? Ripple Effect is a partner. They are not a program within the Portland Public Schools. They're a partner that works with a lot of our leadership programs. So they have been great partners, for example, with Make It Happen, giving students who otherwise might not have opportunities or access to those types of programs. They just recently received a fairly substantial grant from, I believe, LL Bean or somebody else to really be more systematic about the work that they do in Portland schools. They've been doing a lot of work here in Casco Bay around leadership development, and so now they're able to take that also to Deering and Portland High School as a part of that grant. But they're not a sort of a Portland Public Schools program. They're an amazing partner for the school.
Yeah, one of the Make It Happen students mentioned he found out through it, so that's why I was like, take a ice climbing.
Anything else? I would just say thank you for this presentation. I don't have anything to add, but this is incredibly important work and obviously a very capable team. So I was excited to have this presentation tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're on to public comment, where it is before the hour of 10 o'clock. We would take public comment on any items not on this evening's agenda. You just state your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
All right, I'll be less than that. Mark LaPointe, 124 Oakdale Street in Portland, and I'm president of the Woodford's Oakdale Neighborhood Association. The reason why I came is that just to give some feedback on the meeting on January 16th at King Middle School, when they talked about the roundabout that's being proposed near the law school where Deering and Brighton Avenues come together, and Falmouth Street, and Bedford Street. First of all, there was a complaint is that no one heard about the meeting through the notification means of Portland, heard about it on the news, and it came to the paper. That said, the consultants and some of the city workers were the presenters, and they had lots of data on vehicular traffic, and which is pretty strong, and the effect of the roundabout on that traffic. And when queried about any data on pedestrians and bicycle traffic, they had none. And they said they really hadn't studied it. So some of the parents, and this has been a conversation we've had over the last few weeks, and the one thing we do know is that the heaviest traffic takes the same time, about 7:30 in the morning, when kids are going to school. And that's an area where I think it's, if you're in a less than a mile radius, you have to walk or take a bike. So some of the parents who thought the roundabout was a good idea had some doubts after that, thinking that, especially in the winter months where it's dark and kids are going to school, people coming into that roundabout, usually in a roundabout, you're looking for other traffic. You're really not taking attention to pedestrians. So that's a concern. Although pedestrians do have right-of-way, bicyclists don't. I live near the park at Longfellow Park, and I see the kids on their bicycles, and they're not the most attentive kids in the world. So I wonder how they're going to navigate that roundabout if they decide to take their kids to school. One of our members is on the Bicycle Coalition, and he said, that's something you really have to take care of. And he's an avid biker, he knows how to handle that, but he just thinks a bunch of kids going around their posse, and I live near the park, and I see the kids on their bikes, and they're not that attentive. They're teenagers or adolescents. So I don't have any solutions, but when we talked about it to the presenters after, they seemed to take it somewhat lightly and say, well, the cars are only going 15 miles an hour and this, that, and the other thing, and it wasn't satisfactory. And so I don't have any solution, but I just think that you ought to be aware of the problem, because when we asked them if they had been in contact with you and other people in the school board and the superintendent, they said no. I don't know if that's true or not, but when we just tried to find out if that any evidence that there was some collaboration, they said no. No one had any inkling that there was. And it's funny because in their handout they talked about a roundabout in Green Bay, Wisconsin that was near a school, and talked about the collaboration of various actors in the school board, and the school was the main actor and all that. So I don't know. I just want you to be aware of it. I'm not a traffic guy. I do observe kids. None of my kids are in school. None of my grandkids are in school. But when you see them together, they're not an attentive bunch. And just worry about kids in the morning coming across that area. And, roundabouts aren't will they stop for the kids? I don't know. And then another thing we were thinking of is that if there's and we mentioned it to the presenters, will the drivers start peeling off and go down Noy Street, Danford, Pitt, Fessenden, Falmouth? And that'll never happen, but I was in Cambridge last fall, and there's an app that gets you through these things. And the driver saw there was a roadblock up there, and it was my daughter, she looked at her app and zipped through the neighborhood. So that's another thing you don't want. You don't want to increase traffic through the neighborhood because these same kids are walking to school. So that's the problem. I have no solution. I just want you to be aware of it. And thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Or no?
I don't think so. We appreciate it. Any other public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment and take a motion for adjournment. We do have a workshop. I'm hoping maybe we can get through it in about 10, 15 minutes. So I'd call for a motion for adjournment. Mr. Belfont, seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. All those in favor? It is unanimous with the students in the affirmative.